Welcome to the Maxwell Leadership Podcast. This is the podcast that adds value to leaders who multiply value to others. Now, I've been saying that statement for some time now, but it was never better illustrated to me than recently when I met Bob Frusciano. Bob is a very dear friend of mine and John Maxwell and Chris Goede. He actually leads several businesses and is a high influencer in South Florida. He was telling me that every month he and several top-level business leaders come together to dissect the podcast and then to kind of challenge each other on how they're going to go influence others in their network. And I said, Bob, that's exactly what I'm talking about when I say this is the podcast that adds value to leaders who will multiply value to others. So to Bob Frusciano and all of my friends in West Palm Beach, Florida, thank you for living out the purpose of this podcast and taking it, dissecting it, and then making it better so that you can multiply value to others. Now, if you're new to the podcast, my name is Mark Cole, and I'm the CEO of Maxwell Leadership. Last week, we discussed the 3 E's of developing leaders. You may remember that one of those E's was equipping. See, the only way to grow your organization is to equip people. That's why it's important to develop a strategy for equipping those you lead. Today, John Maxwell is going to teach you and I 4 ways to equip people. After John's lesson, I will be joined by my co-host today, Chris Goede, to discuss what we've gleaned from our own experiences of equipping others. See, equipping others is both a challenge and a benefit. So, while you listen, be sure to download our bonus resource. It's a free PDF that accompanies John's lesson each week. Today's PDF will help you capture all the points and the key takeaways from John's lesson. Just visit maxwellpodcast.com/equip and click the bonus resource button. If you'd like to watch this episode on YouTube, you can visit maxwellpodcast.com/YouTube, or you can click YouTube in our link that's provided in the show notes. That's it. Now sit back or lean forward, grab a pen, grab a paper. Here is John C. Maxwell.
Great quote. It's in your notes. It is only as we develop others that we permanently succeed. Firestone said that. Here's what Maxwell says. It's only as we develop ourselves that we have the credibility to develop others. So all of development and equipping of others begins with me. Now, if you want to become a great equipper, make equipping your number 1 responsibility. You have to make it your number 1 responsibility. Look at the quote. It's always easier to dismiss people than it is to train them. No great leader ever built a reputation on firing people. Many have built a reputation on developing them. Get on the positive side. Why make equipping others your number 1 responsibility? 2 reasons. Letter A, it's the only way to grow big. The reason you want to make equipping your number 1 responsibility is the only way you'll ever grow your business bigger than yourself is by including others than yourself. And number 2, it's the only way to keep growing. It's the only way to grow big, and it's the only way to keep growing. Now, let me teach you from my mistakes. When I went to my first church in 1969, fresh out of college, graduated 2nd in my class, didn't have a clue. I mean, all my professors thought I was pretty good, but they didn't teach me anything practical. And one thing I didn't know how to do when I went to my first church is I didn't know how to equip people. So therefore, I did everything myself. Nobody ever trained me, nobody ever taught me, never saw it modeled. So here I am, a kid right out of college, working hard, trying to grow this church. Now, here are the results. And I wrote these down. Don't write them down, just think about it. When I look at my first church, watch this. It grew when I touched it, it complained when I didn't, and it fell apart when I left. So when I went to my second church, I said to myself, I'll never let that happen again. I may build it a little slower. It may take a little more time, but I'm going to put my number one priority of equipping people. And when I went to Lancaster, I started looking for the good ones. I started looking for my eagles. I started pulling them apart. I'm going to tell you what happened in Lancaster. I, over a period of 5 years, equipped 35 people. Now you said, boy, you're awfully slow, John. Those 35 people literally brought, not me, those 35 people brought another 1,000 people into the organization that I never touched. They never knew me. They would show up to church, and I would never say, whoa, they showed up because I went to see them. They showed up because somebody else was doing it. And I learned a long time ago that it's better to start equipping people and pouring your time into the people that will make the organization than going around trying to make everybody happy, trying to touch everybody, and watching it fall. Hey, you go on vacation, the group goes down. Come on now. That's not what you want. That isn't what you're living for. That isn't what you're trying to build for the future in your business. You're wanting to pour your life through people until when you're gone, that business can continue to grow in your life. So some questions to ask yourself, very simple. They're in your notes. How much time do I spend weekly equipping others? Whoa. I mean, hey, in your week, how many hours? How many people do I equip? How many people are they equipping? These are good questions to ask. So, number one, make equipping your number one responsibility. Are you ready for number two? Communicate this priority to your people. After you have made equipping number one priority, you begin to communicate it. Now, by the way, let me tell you something. The greatest way to communicate it to them is letting them watch you do it. People do what people see. It's the number one motivational principle in all the world. See, people tend to stay motivated when they see the importance of the things that they are asked to do. You never know what kind of a giant you have built until you leave it alone. Are you all right? If you've got to go over there and weed that garden and keep putting water on that garden and fertilizer on that garden, and you got to keep working that baby, after a while you'll understand that you don't have what you want. Now, here's what you communicate when you communicate the priority of equipping people. Here's what you communicate. I'm going to spend a lot of time with a few people. Who are they? Committed people. What will we do? Equip. I'm going to give a lot of recognition to a few people. Who are they? Committed people. What will they do? Equip. You start communicating those messages to your groups, and you'll begin to change the whole nature of your group. Number three, principle number three in equipping, develop a relationship with those that you do equip. What I mean is very simple. Find the heart before you ask for their hand. You probably read the book Iacocca, did you? It's a good book. In the book Iacocca, he talks about an interview that he did with Vince Lombardi, the great coach, the legendary coach for the Green Bay Packers. If you'll just listen, let me just read a paragraph. He asked Lombardi what it took to develop a winning team, and here's what Lombardi said. There are a lot of coaches with good ball clubs who know the fundamentals and have plenty of discipline, but they still don't win the game. Then you come to a third ingredient. If you're going to play together as a team, you've got to care for one another. You've got to love each other. Each player has to be thinking about the next guy and saying to himself, if I don't block that man, Paul is going to get his legs broken. I've got to do my job well in order that he can do his. He said the difference between mediocrity and greatness, this is what Lombardi said, is the feeling that these guys have for one another. That feeling that the guys have for one another is based on a relationship. It's based on bonding yourself to them. Now, here's what I'm saying. The people that you equip are the ones you have to bond yourself to. And how do you bond to that people? Connectedness. You build and you bond through connectedness. You've got to go home and you've got to develop a relationship with the people that you equip, and you do it through connectedness. Number four. The fourth way to equip people is to develop a strategy for equipping people. I'm going to give you a strategy. Don Shula has a wonderful strategy for equipping players, the coach of the Miami Dolphins. He says, 1, tell people what you want them to do. 2, show them what good performance looks like. That's very good. 3, let them do it. 4, observe their performance. 5, praise progress or redirect it. Here's Maxwell's strategy for equipping people. Starts with the M's. Modeling. Starts with modeling. I model. In other words, I do it. In other words, they watch me do it so they know how to do it. Number 2 is mentoring. I do it and you are with me. Number 3 is monitoring. You do it and I'm with you. Number 4 is motivating. You do it. Simple enough? And 5 is multiplying. You do it and someone is with you.
Hey, podcast listeners! How would you like to be equipped with the tools to continue your personal growth and refine your strengths and weaknesses, all while being surrounded by other growth-minded leaders like yourself? You may have heard of our International Maxwell Conference, or IMC. It's our biannual event in which Maxwell Leadership certified team members come from all around the world to grow and learn together. IMC this August is the first time we're opening the event to the public by kicking the event off with our first ever Personal Growth Day. This is a 1.5-day event on August 29th through the 30th in Orlando, Florida. And it's designed to dig deeper into who you are and how you tick so that you can become the best version of yourself. If you are unable to attend Personal Growth Day in person, we also offer virtual access to the event. If you would like to participate in a one-of-a-kind experience and stand shoulder to shoulder with growing leaders who will sharpen your skills and equip you to create powerful, positive impacts in your life, go to maxwellleadership.com/Personal Growth Day to learn more or get your ticket. We will see you there.
Welcome back. For those of you viewing, welcome to the studio. It's good to be in the studio with you, Chris. I'm so glad you're here, buddy.
Yeah.
For those of you listening in, join us sometime and notice that Chris has a voice for radio and a face for YouTube. I'll tell you that. Hey, while John was talking, I thought about a Chris Hogan quote that I've heard. Great leaders focus on equipping their teams. It is unfair to expect what you did not equip.
Yeah.
And it brings me to what we really want to deliver to you today, and that is equipping others is the only way to grow big and to become bigger. And Chris, that's exactly we talk about here at Maxwell Leadership. We talk about we want to be bigger, better, brighter. Our best days are not behind us.
Yeah.
We're leaning in. We're stretching toward the next level of impact. We've got the next summit of accomplishment in our view. And I think John's telling us today, you and I, to get there, better start figuring out how to equip people.
Yeah, it's a multiplication of what you desire to do as a leader, right? And John has taught us this along the way where we don't want to develop followers. It's back to why we do what we do, right? We want to develop leaders. So we want to add value. I love what you talked about with Bob early as we introduced this episode. What I love about that is Bob's in his mid-70s and still learning.
I love it.
And still growing so that he can develop other leaders. And so I love that. While he was talking, I was thinking about his book, The Leader's Greatest Return. I was with an organization last week, and I brought that book up because everybody's like, man, when you think about business and you think about leadership, and you're like, what is the return on investment? And what John gets to at the heart of this lesson in that book is it's about developing and equipping people. Now, before we dive in and I pull some stuff just from what you're experiencing as a leader, I want to share with our audience, those that are watching and those that are listening, some statistics that I think will just kind of wake us up to the importance of the topic today. Gallup says that out of 10 people that are promoted, okay, 1 out of those 10, they have high talent to be able to lead other people, okay? 2 out of those 10 have functioning talent. The other 8, it needs to be developed in them.
Wow.
And so when you look at that and you think about your team and your people and those that are on your team, 8 out of 10 need you or your leaders to be equipping them. The other thing it said that I think is just important is they said only 40% of people feel like they have a chance to learn and grow at work, and only 33% feel someone at work encourages their development. Now, John talks about the law of the lid, and I think in organization and in teams, our lid is this topic right here, is equipping. So I want to start off about the fact that John, number one, says that equipping has to be the number one responsibility of a leader. Mm-hmm. Now, listen, you are crazy busy. You're running multiple companies. Talk to us a little bit about how do you think about that and how do you act on that, of that being your number one responsibility to be able to build this legacy that you're building, standing on the shoulders of John with our organization. How do you go about that? How do you manage that? How do you find time for that? What does that look like in your schedule?
Well, so I want to answer that, Chris, and I want to answer it this way, because as John was talking today, and we didn't even mention this really in our pre-comments with one another and our incredible team that helps you and I do these podcasts, but I think first a leader has to really understand what I believe is a big difference between equipping, empowering, and delegation.
Absolutely.
Okay,
that's
so
good.
we're going to save equipping because that's where we want to go today. But let me tell you the difference between empowering and delegation. I delegate the things I don't want to do that people should be able to do, and I want to get rid of that, and I want it out of sight, out of mind. Yeah. And so I delegate. You and I have worked for leaders in our past that they were chief delegators. Yeah. They didn't care if you had the power. They didn't care if you had the resources. They just cared that you had the responsibility. They didn't give you power. They didn't give you resources. They just gave you responsibility. And there's nothing more frustrating with a leader than to be delegated something to with no power and no resources.
That's good.
Now, empowering is a little bit better because we don't just delegate. We actually give you the authority. You have the authority. I have been here with John. He's now promoted me to the CEO. And Chris, I want you to be over business developing and merging and acquisition with the organization. And I look at everybody that says, whatever Chris says, it's me saying it. He has the power to do that. And you do quite well sometimes. But then there is a time to where you have been empowered, but you don't have the resources.
Right.
I think that's where equipping is what John's trying to do. Equipping is giving you the power and the resources and the experience. In other words, we'll find out a little bit later in the lesson that a really good equipping strategy makes sure that you have experience before you have responsibility. Delegation, there is no experience. You just have responsibility. Most of the time with delegation, resources are not even thought. And so when I'm listening to this lesson, I put it in a very high level of leadership called equipping, not empowering, not delegation. Let's now answer your question, because it's different every time we get a new role and responsibility.
Yeah.
This is true confessions. And by the way, every Wednesday, I feel like it's confession time for Mark Cole. The things I need to work better
at. It's actually an intervention that the organization has decided to implement.
Chris comes in as an ambassador for all of our leadership every Wednesday to try to get me back on track.
Yeah.
And today's really no exception, because the pace that I'm running, the pace that we all are running, is causing me to shortcut equipping. And you can't shortcut equipping. Again, John's going to show us, John did show us in the lesson a little bit earlier, that there is a distinct process. That's the 5 M's. There's a distinct process that you have to go through for equipping, and you can't shortcut it. Recently, we added to our team an operational leader. I've never had for a long time, I shouldn't say never, but for a long time, we've not had a chief operating officer, a operational leader. And I was cautioned by my business advisors before we hired Matt. And they said, trust me, you're going to want to delegate, equip, empower, all those things in 6 months. But it's taken you 22 years of leading operations to get where you are, and you can't do that in 6 months. And I'm discovering, Chris, that in my own world of trying to equip, I lose the number one responsibility of equipping people at this stage in my life and replace that number one priority with holding them accountable. But I'm holding them accountable to something that I have yet to equip them, and I'm frustrating all of us. And that's where I think that Every leader has to understand when they move to the next level of responsibility and they want to get to doing the things that their new appointment is requiring of them, they still cannot shortcut or reprioritize the fact that all leaders need a number one priority of equipping others.
Yeah. It's interesting. You just talked about frustrating others. When you were going through and you're talking about, and I love this, you were talking about the difference between delegation, empowerment, and then this equipping. And what I loved about it is I was like, oh, it's an aha moment for me personally, because you were talking about these differences. And for me, I was like, if I go down this route of someone delegating something or empowering me, there's more frustration in that from my leader to me that I feel towards my leader than if there is true equipping. And then you just added on top of that where you talked about not only do I need to equip them, but then I need to make sure I stay in equipping and not just holding them accountable to that. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was a great illustration for that.
You know, I before we move to the next point, Chris, I mean, John gives us 3 questions here in this point. You may even have some comments on this, and I want you to make them because you've been in the organization a long time. But I mean, think about if every leader that's listening to this podcast or watching it would do what John challenged us to do right now. Mic drop, podcast over, go to work. And it's these 3 questions. How much time do I spend weekly equipping others? And Chris, while John was teaching, I went back in the Rolodex in my mind. That's an old word for you young people that means a big old Rolodex thing on your desk of just memories or contacts was what it was most of the time. But I went through and shuffled through my mind really quick, and I went, last week, how much time did I spend equipping? Oh, it was that silent in my mind. I don't think I spent any time last week equipping. In the season that we're in, foul, throw the penalty, 15 yards back. I'm going to look today at my calendar and say, how much time am I spending equipping? And then the other question is how many people are we equipping? I've got in my mindset now, I've got 1 or 2 people that I need to be equipping so that I can get some things off my plate, rather than who can I equip to help me reach for the future. I'm trying to equip a select few to help me with my present challenges. And as CEO, if I don't keep equipping people for our future rather than equipping people to get my current schedule in check, I'm going to lose the ability to grow bigger. That was convicting to me, dude. And then finally, this third question, how many people are we equipping, goes back to that same thing. Man, I'm just equipping just a couple right now, and I am paralyzing or stymieing our growth for the future the smaller my pool of equipping is.
That's good. I appreciate the transparency. I'm going to jump in this boat with you because as I listen to John and even now just our conversation, I feel convicted as a leader inside the organization when I look at those questions. And so no doubt one of the takeaways for you, whether you're watching us today on YouTube or you're listening to us, is to really get alone and answer those questions transparently. Then maybe even ask some of your top key leaders to answer them on your behalf and see where there is a gap for that. Here's where I was thinking when you were just talking about that. I read an article some time ago where Harvard Business Review said 85% of the time of most successful leaders, they interviewed and studied 200 leaders across the board. I don't know the filter, what they decided, but 85% of their time was focused on the EQ side of leadership, the emotional intelligence and connection with their people. 85% of the time. Wow. You and I are sitting here saying we're convicted because we don't even know if one day we spent. Now, did we do some emotional intelligence connections? We did. But did we get specific about the equipping side? I don't know that we have. And so I would challenge each and every listener and viewer to really have a conversation with yourself about that, because that's how we do multiply the impact of what you want to do. Now,
and let me go to that. I'm so sorry.
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
Jake, just pause the clock because we got so much to talk about. But right before you were a part of this same conversation, Jared Cagle's in the studio with us. He helps me with content. He helps us all with content. Right now, he's helping John with this new book, drum roll. You can't wait for it. It's going to be The Laws of Communication. Can't wait to open that up. And he was talking about John jumping on a plane. We've both got an international trip that we're preparing for currently at the time of recording. And John taking time to make sure that he spends time equipping somebody that is going to give him back some things that he needs on this trip. I was recently on a trip with John and Jared where John was laying out with Jared, these are the things that I need. This is what will help me. And then he's following up and saying, hey, as Jared said in studio a while ago, 10 o'clock a.m., 10 o'clock a.m. I'll tell you, it wasn't news to Jared. 10 o'clock may have been news to Jared, but that the timeline was coming wasn't, because a month ago we were on a plane and I heard John preparing Jared for that. You never get too established, back to me and you playing the conviction card. You never get too successful in life that you don't have to be intentional in equipping.
Yeah.
This weekend's expectation of Jake, have it to me by 10, began a month ago on a plane of equipping because there was intentionality around equipping. So you made a point there that, yeah, equipping is important, but intentionality around that equipping is the thing that's going to make it feel less like delegation and unrealistic expectation, because intentionality and due diligence was done in the equipping process.
That's good. And not only intentionality, but in that story you're just talking about, the why behind 10 o'clock is coming, right? Because then if you explain the why to the team members and you bring them along in that process, it doesn't feel like a project, a timeline, a delegation. They feel part of it. So I love that. Now I want to move on to point number 2, which, by the way, we're not going to cover all 4. Jake doesn't let us cover all the content once we're in here together. But I love this because I think you have to then communicate the priority of this to the organization. You know, the last question that you just reviewed for us that John talked about is, how many people then are they equipping? So in this conversation, you're my leader. So your question to me is, Chris, how many people are you equipping in order to help us accomplish this mission, this vision we're after? You said this statement. I want to share this with our audience. In one of our leadership team meetings, you came in and you didn't even say hello. You didn't even say, hey, how's everybody's weekend? Whatever. You came in and you said, all right, here we go. You couldn't be here today. Who's sitting in your seat?
Wow. Yep.
And all of us were like, don't pick on me. And you were just like, go. Who is it? Chris, who is it? Right? And so, Becky, who is it? Whatever. And I was like, man, like that. Yeah, that's so good. If we were doing this in a way that we should be doing it as leaders of organization, we would have it right there. But what you were doing was you were implementing and living out this, hey, I'm going to communicate. This is a top priority for all of our people. So talk about that. Talk about the desire that you have as a CEO of the enterprise to make sure that your people and that you are continually emphasizing and communicating the power, and not only the power, but the need, because it's so critical to be developing and equipping your people.
Well, it's so funny because our podcast family is going to think that I'm just this cutthroat, going to kill everybody, cut everybody out, fire everybody kind of leader. I don't think I'm like that, but maybe I need to go check, because let me tell you why I say that though, Chris. A week ago today, I'm in a meeting with 2 of our leaders. You were not even in the meeting. And I said, guys, who's your replacement? And they looked at me like, what? And I said, oh, by the way, if something happens to me, who's my replacement? What are y'all going to do if something happens to me?
Yeah.
Now, that's kind of fatalistic, right? And it's so funny that you just reminded me, I'd forgotten about that. You reminded me of a meeting several months ago where I challenged every leader. First thing I came into the meeting was, hey, who's your replacement? What are you going to do? And then I just had that same conversation a week ago. I think, and I justify it with this, the law of the bench. Every leader is prepared. Surprises don't prepare leaders, it reveals leaders. I use all of these illustrations, and that was certainly my point 7 days ago with these leaders. Guys, who are you training for the unexpected? Who is your law of the bench? And I began to articulate to them what I may not have articulated in this leadership meeting that you're referencing. I believe it's the responsibility of every leader to know his players and to strengthen the bench of players on the team. That's not anything earth-shattering or great revealing, I'm sure, to our podcast audience. What's revealing to me when you ask this question today is I told both of those leaders last week who I would replace them with if something happened to them. Now, I was in this meeting, I was really challenging them because we're not moving the ball forward as quickly as I feel like that we should. And I was going, guys, who is your replacement, and be inviting them into it because they probably can make you better. So it wasn't just let's find a replacement. It was who else is brainstorming with you because your replacement may have better ideas than you because you're too close to the challenge.
Yeah. Love that.
But as I'm listening to you ask me that question today, as I'm reminded that I asked that question again 1 week ago, which means I may be asking that question way too much, I realized that while I have a plan on who would be their replacement, I have no intentionality on how I am equipping them today. So what am I going to do, Chris? Am I going to wait to equip my bench when they're actually in the game? Or am I going to equip them while they're on the bench so that if an injury happens, they're able to get right in? Your son plays football. You played football. No coach waits until the injury to equip the second string. The second string is making the first string better by learning the game plan, by scrimmaging with them. In the leadership game, in mine and your company, podcast listeners, are we scrimmaging enough with the backups to make sure that they are equipped when they become a starter?
Yeah.
And I'm telling you this right here, I need to quit recording a podcast and go equip some people because I've got a plan.
Yeah.
I just am not backing that plan up of equipping to make sure they're ready for game day.
Yeah. To further that illustration, and then I'm going to move on to the last point. You look at, now we're biased, we're in the South, so we're big SEC fans. When you look at the level of schools at the highest level in the SEC, the reason they're successful is they have a bench that is ready to step in at any point in time.
Yep.
Injury, draft, next man up. And they talk about that. So do we run our teams like that? Do we run our companies like that? You and I are sitting there shaking our head no together. And
but I was doing that just for our viewers, not for our podcast listeners. I didn't want the podcast listeners to know.
Yeah. And so I love this, right? You got to be communicating this because it has to be a priority, not only to you as a leader. You got to I'm not going to cover point 4, but John lays out an incredible model.
Yeah.
And the first one he talks about is model it. So leaders, before you go communicating this, you need to be modeling it so that then your people understand what that looks like. And that's the first step of the 5 M's that John gives us. Okay, now last point, all right? I really want to hear from you on this because you and I, we have a bent towards this. And John talks about we have to develop a relationship with those that we equip. And I think this is critical. This is the foundation, I think, to all influence. We call it, John calls it level 2, and the 5 levels of leadership that increase your influence by developing relationships. You cannot equip somebody and you cannot pull the best out of them and have them lead at higher levels unless you build a relationship with them. Yep. Which is why leaders, you have to be very careful, depending on the size of your organization, how many direct reports you do have.
Right.
Because everything we're talking about here today, you can't do 7, 8, 9, 10 times your direct report. So be careful about that. Talk about you and how you lead and equip people by starting, because I know you do this so well, with the foundation of building a relationship with people and why that's so important.
Yeah, and thank you for giving me a lot of kudos on it because I do believe that it is a strength of mine. I today, in admitting that and hopefully not coming across as cocky or got all of that together, I must also admit that while it's a strength of mine, I'm not so sure it's a discipline of mine right now. And I believe that if you find something that you're very good at, you got to have the strength and recognize it's a strength, but you've got to have the discipline to keep it present when situations, responsibilities begin to shift around you. I was reminded of that recently. I was invited to stand in with somebody that used to work on our team, Chris, and I got to be in his wedding. And I went out with one of our teammates that also was in the wedding. And I got to spend, it was an hour and a half from our lodging to the event venue, which is where the rehearsal and the wedding was. So it was about 6.5 hours worth of drive time. And in this 6.5 hours of time, I had one of our leaders on our leadership team in the room or in the car with me. And what occurred to me as I was on the plane coming home from that experience, it occurred to me how little I had been spending in cultivating that relationship. Now, was the relationship fine? Did we pick it right up where we left it the last time we went to play golf or ski or whatever we have done together recently? Absolutely we did, because of years and years and years of operating in my strengths. But here's what I discovered. You can have the strength, but not the discipline. And without both of them, you will not be effective in equipping without both the strength and the discipline to stay in that strength. And thank you for complimenting me. I do think I'm pretty good at that. How long have you and your wife and me and my wife been trying to get on the calendar for a dinner? Don't answer the question. It's been a long time, listeners. It's been a long time. But that's really important, because you and I both want to invite our better halves, let's be really clear if that's the case, into what we do on a daily basis, because you and I both travel a lot. And yet today, as I'm telling this, I have the strength to do that and sit down with you and Sarah and me, you and Stephanie and Sarah would have a brilliant time. But do I have the discipline? And that's the question on this. You may have the strength or not, but you better have the discipline, whether you have the strength or not, to keep it present in your leadership. Yeah, and listen, leaders, Mark brings up a really good point here. The discipline part of this is, leaders, we default to saying, I don't have time to do that. I can't put that on my calendar. And so not only do you have to be intentional and disciplined about it, but you be creative about it. You are already making trips. You are already in meetings. You're already going to lunches. Mark just used a great example of, he was intentional. It may have been unintentional, but he used the time of this car ride as intentionality to be able to help and equip, invest in, and build a relationship to a deeper level with one of our key leaders. So think about it creatively, because I know everybody's answer is, I don't have time to do that. Figure out time to do it, because it's key. All right, now listen, I'm going to throw it to you to close up, but I want to give you one last statement to let you react to. I deal with this. I know a lot of leaders probably deal with this as well. We have a little campaign around here called Free Mark, okay? And he'll talk a little bit about this. But we have to, as leaders, let go of our desire to have direct control over situations inside our organization. John has taught us, if someone can do something 80% as good as we have, give it to them. It'll create a natural mentoring, equipping conversation, and then they're probably going to be able to do it better than you. As you wrap up for us, just react to that comment about us wanting to, especially with your change in leadership and owning the Maxwell leadership and the shift that you and John are making in your relationship of having some key decisions and key part of, our P&Ls and different things that you have to relinquish control of to get above all of that, to continue to equip and develop people and get out of the weeds of it. So I'll let you, as you're smiling at me, I may not ever be invited back to another podcast, but react to that, to our leaders, because we all deal with it as you wrap up this lesson for us today. And let me say this. The reason I'm smiling is because this is a whole lesson here. In fact, we need John sitting in here mentoring us with his incredible wisdom. Free Mark should be the rallying cry of every leader. Now, I'm very aware that in our podcast audience, there's people that work for somebody else that needs to be freed up. There's somebody that is an entrepreneur that has nobody to help free them up. But I want to really capture this concept, because it really is the essence of why we equip people. You've got to give up to go up. You got to free yourself up and allow others to step up if you're going to continue climbing yourself. It is absolutely true when you hear leaders say it all the time, work yourself out of a job. Yeah. And it's true, and that's what's kind of been driving this Free Mark campaign that we have within our leadership team, that says there's a new level of responsibility. There's a stepping out, it feels like, or a stepping up that is required of me, that is causing me to say, don't let me be encumbered or paralyzed with the responsibilities of yesterday. I think that's the essence of what we're talking about with equip. With what we're saying, that equipping is the tool that will allow us to empower others so that we can do what only we can do. That's great. And again, I want to be very sensitive to the fact that many of you, you're not at a place to where you can have a team of people around you. But at the same time, if you will find people that will catch your vision, and maybe it's significant relationships in your life that will free you up to get more focused on doing what you can do, no matter who it is, volunteer, paid or an executive that can command people to free you up, no matter where it is. There is a process John has given us in this lesson that is called equipping people if you want to be effective in freeing podcast listener up. And that's what our goal is for you. That's our challenge. That's what we spent today about. Hey, there's one other podcast that we did that just kind of caught my mind as we were listening today. And we'll put it in the show notes. It's a relevant episode, and it's called Motivation, How to Inspire Effort. And I think if you want to go a little deeper this week, after listening to this podcast, you would like to do that, we'll put that in the show notes. You will love that. I want to close today, Chris, with what I love to close, and that's a listener comment. In fact, it's Joseph. And Joseph was listening to the Law of Connection series, and he said, I'm using the 17 laws of teamwork with my team of senior agents. The feedback from my team has been awesome. He said, I also shared the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership with them, which, by the way, we'll put it in the show notes. John just released the 25th anniversary edition of that. In fact, we'll give you a 15% discount with the link there if you'll go and take advantage of that book. And Joseph, if you know somebody that took advantage of that 15% discount, make them take you to lunch, dude. You save them some money. But Joseph went on to say, these laws are really awesome. And we started to get the names and the ways that we could do things that when we use them, we would be able to start growing immensely in our area. And Joseph, I want to tell you that that's why we do what we do. You know why? Because the world needs powerful, positive change. The world needs leaders that can create powerful, positive change because everyone deserves to be led well.